Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Managing Marathons. I'm Laith, and I'm just going to give you some reflections and some top tips and hints that I learnt from my very first ultramarathon, UTS 50 Snowdonia. So here we go. In no particular order, I repeat, no particular order. These are just the thoughts that have come to me and I've jotted them down and I've mulled over them, and they're all relevant. It's just which ones you prioritize yourself when you come to run either your next or your first ultramarathon. These are a reflection of my first ultramarathon. So if you run lots of ultramarathons, some of these may not apply to you, but if you haven't, and you're planning to run your first ultra this time next year, perhaps for UTS 50, 25 or 100 or 100 miler, if you're very brave, not necessarily recommended if it's your very first marathon, ultramarathon. So there are 17 tips, and as I say, in no particular order. So tip number one is just do it, as Nike say. So in other words, have no fear. If you've planned to do an ultramarathon, then the chances are, or at least should be, that you've done the training accordingly. So if you want to do an ultramarathon, as I did, I was actually fearful and a little bit scared about doing one. I'm probably biting off more than I could chew, is what I thought to myself. So I've done plenty of marathons. I'm now on my 9th marathon. The Ultra Trail Snowdonia, if you count that as a marathon, is my 10th marathon. So I've learned one or two things. I started off in April 23. I've now done 10 marathons, and it's May 24. So in the space of 1 year, I've done 10 marathons. So I've learned one or two things, but I've only done one ultra. And so the first thing is I'd say is just have a go, but not frivolously. If you're gonna have a go, make sure you sign up for a marathon that's suitable for yourself, that's maybe in the UK rather than abroad, so you've got some good family support and support network around you. Come back to that in a moment. But my first tip was to have a go. I'm really, really glad I've done the UTS 50. Yes, it was hard work, but I'm glad I took the decision to actually do it. And that's the main point here. So tip number two is get out more. And what I mean by that is don't just go for a little walk now and again, but just spend much more time on your feet. So I'm based in the UK. So for me, it's a 5-6 hour drive to Snowdonia, North Wales. It's a long haul, and it's about a 3 or 4 hour drive to South Wales, depending on where in South Wales. But I do love to get out into the mountains. Now, what I mean by spend more time in your feet is just be on your feet for quite long periods of time. Get a backpack, pick your favorite snacks, get a couple of drinks in there. I usually take a flask of hot tea, some sandwiches, some muesli bars, crisps, peanuts, salty stuff as well as sweet stuff. And then just go out and hike or walk. Pick a couple of easy walks to start off with, but just spend more time on your feet. The one thing I have learned from an ultramarathon is you are outdoors for a very long time. The typical marathon, at least for me, is about 4 hours. It's generally flat and it's on a sealed surface, tarmac of some description. It's very, very different to an ultra marathon or an ultra trail marathon. The terrain is very different. It's boggy, it's hilly, it's partly scrambling. So just being on your feet outdoors for 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 hours a day really is good preparation, particularly if you're hiking with a backpack. That muscle group that you're exercising is really good groundwork and good aerobic work for an ultramarathon. So that was tip number two. Number three is your fueling. So your hydration and your nutrition. So what thankfully I got right in my first ultra was I just drank way more than I probably thought I needed, just based on other YouTube videos I've watched and or podcasts that I've listened to. So I was eating or drinking every 10 minutes or so, you know, either a bite of some kind of muesli bar or a bit of banana or some salty snacks. I was certainly drinking an awful lot. So I had 2 500ml bottles and a bladder, which is 2.5 liters. And I went through 2.5 liters at every aid station, which, if you do the math, is 7.5 liters in one day, plus drinking from my little cup at the aid station. So my approximate calculation is I got through almost 10 liters of liquid over a whole day. That's an awful lot of liquid. You would never drink that in a normal day. but you're working and you're sweating so much during an ultramarathon, particularly if it's a hot day, then you just need to drink an awful lot. In terms of fueling, you can imagine it's a bit like a car. So let's use the metaphor of a car. If you fill the tank, you're going to go a certain distance. Now that distance really depends on how quickly you go or not. And that comes back to your training and sort of noting down and just recording how much time it takes you to run a particular distance based on what food. In other words, what are your calorie intakes per hour? So using the metaphor of a car, if you press the accelerator hard and sitting at a high speed, yes, you'll get through the fuel, but you'll go a much shorter distance. So you'll cover the distance quickly, but you'll run out of fuel, possibly before you get to your destination. Now take the same volume of fuel, i.e. the same volume of food, and take your time, pace yourself. You're much more likely to go much further. So if your car takes you for, 300 miles on a tank full with your foot pressed down a lot, then if you take your time and be more conservative with your fuel consumption, that same tank of fuel may take you 500 miles, so 200 miles more. A couple of things with that. One, you're pacing yourself more accurately in terms of how much energy you're expending over the time that you're out on your feet. I saw some people on my last ultra at UTS 50 go flying up what was the Lamberis path. Unfortunately, I saw some of them later and I overtook them just very slowly. I was on a plodding pace, but I managed to take them because I think basically they burnt through their matches too early. So take your time. So fueling and hydration, really important. One note about hydration is don't just drink water. Make sure you've got something in there like electrolytes or something like Tailwind. That's what I use. Tailwind's a good mix, both minerals, salts and sugars and or electrolytes. I use SIS, just a couple of tablets in each bottle, and that keeps the electrolytes going. So that's your fueling. Tip number 4 is about your mindset. So I'm big on mindset, and what I say about marathons generally, and I can definitely apply this probably even more so to an ultra marathon, is your mindset is just as important, if not more so, than your physical state. So yes, I would suggest you have a good aerobic base, a good baseline in terms of fitness and strength. But if everybody was equal in terms of their fitness and strength, some people will finish the ultramarathon, some won't. So what's the difference? The difference is your mindset. Your mind controls how you feel. How you feel will create the emotions. Those emotions will help drive the decisions you make. If your mindset is negative and not upbeat, and you have this sort of fixed mindset instead of a growth mindset, you're much more likely to stop and not finish. And I saw this, we had about a 25-26% attrition or fallout rate on the UTS 50. I believe on the UTS 100 it was 40%. That's a big chunk. And I strongly suspect a lot of that was down to mindset. So be positive. Have some positive affirmations that you can think about. Think about the finish line. Consider all that training you've done for 3, 4, 5 months, some people even longer. All that training is valuable time spent on your feet, conditioning your body and conditioning your mind and practicing the hydration and nutrition. Don't let that go to waste just based on a poor mindset. So think positively, have some positive mantras, do whatever it takes. It's literally one step in front of the other. And, I saw people half my age, in fact, some of them a third of my age, giving up because they just said to themselves, I can't go anymore. And physically, I strongly suspect they were stronger and fitter than I was, but their mindset let them down. So that was tip number 4. Number 5 is speed up. What I mean by speed up is, yes, you can do all your aerobic training. And a bit like marathons, when I train for marathons, I still do my fast hill repeats, or I still do my sprints. And I may only do them for 5 or 10 seconds. But what that helps with is your cadence, the speed at which your feet and legs can move. Now, you may not need it all the time. In fact, quite rarely on an ultramarathon, unless you particularly want to go fast on the downhill sections, the descents, or on the fairly flat sections. So the speed at which your legs and feet are moving can be enhanced by a little bit of speed work during your training block. So as I say, for me, I only do it once a week. because for me that works. Some people do it for more than that. I appreciate that. But I do some speed work, and that's generally flat out sprinting and then walking back, usually up a hill. So I'll sprint for 10 seconds up a hill and then walk back down, get my breath, and I'll do that again. And depending on how I feel, I would do between 5 and 10 reps once a week, just to get that, speed up that cadence for your feet movement. And of course, to build up the aerobic base based on a higher threshold. So your heart rate is obviously much higher when you're doing that. So that's what I mean by speed work. And actually, it really helped when I'm coming down some of the tracks, particularly sort of ranges down in Snowdonia, this is in North Wales. Pig track, for example, and the ranger path further down when the steps are quite jagged and you've got big rocks that you've got to sort of float from one to the next, and you've got to keep an eye on where you're going. The speed at which your legs and feet move really does help you. So that's something to bear in mind. If you've got time to do speed work, do some speed work. And what I say about get specific, this is tip number 6. Be specific about the training. Now, I do a lot of marathons, road marathons, but for this ultra marathon, I was training on hills. So I'd go to South and North Wales and specifically train on hills, on high ascents, climbs. And some of them are quite tough and they're brutal, but I wouldn't take any of it back. It worked beautifully for the UTS 50. I knew it was going to be hard, and all that training, again, based on your mindset, really does help. So if you're going for an ultra marathon that has significant elevation, it's pointless training on a flat road. Yes, you'll get a good aerobic base, but you'll be shocked at how much harder it is when you've got to go up an incline, particularly a sustained incline for half an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Some of those hills can be really quite brutal, quite savage, in fact. And as I say, the attrition rate was usually up those hills, and I'm not surprised. They are tough, tough, tough. So be aware of that. If you're going to get into an ultra, particularly with high elevation, be specific about the training. Train on hills, train on steep inclines, as both applies uphill and downhill, because the downhills, your quads take a real hammering. I call it a quad killer. So again, the more you train on the terrain that you're going to race or run on, the more used to it you get, and the more used to it your body gets for that kind of terrain. So that's what I mean about being specific. Tip number 7, strength training. Now, I don't do an awful lot of strength training at the gym, but I do a lot of plyometrics, and that's basic stuff. So you don't need any kit, any equipment. You can do this stuff at home or on the street or in the woods, wherever you are. So essentially, the basics you probably did at school, and that's push-ups, sit-ups, press-ups, squats, lunges, all this kind of stuff. Planks, one of my least favorite, but planks are very, very good for your core strength. Anything that involves building up your core strength, your quads, your hamstrings, your hips, this really helps, particularly towards the middle and end, middle 2/3 of the way through of an ultra marathon, where your form is starting to deteriorate, you're getting tired, and all of that work really does help here. That's when you're getting the benefit of having that extra strength work. If you've got time to do weight training in the gym, more credit to you. That will certainly help. For me, I don't necessarily have time for that, but I can definitely do some stuff at home. Plyometrics, push-ups, press-ups, sit-ups, burpees, skipping. Skipping's a very good one because you're on and off one foot all the time. That stuff really, really helps. And if you've got time, it shouldn't take more than 15, 20 minutes every time you go for a run. So I do that as a small warm down after the run. I do a little bit of stretching before each run, but that's a good way not only to cool down, but also to get some plyometric and strength training after the run. Half an hour max, but 10 or 15 minutes will certainly help, because that 10 or 15 minutes, the cumulative effect over a week. If you've done 15 minutes over 5 or 6 days, you're talking about 2 or 3 hours worth of training. Again, over a month, that might be 12 or 15 hours. So that all helps. And if you're doing a training block for 4 or 5 months, you're then all of a sudden looking at 45, 60 hours of just strength training because you spread it over such a long time. So strength training really does help. Tip number 8, what I call just be flexible or learn to juggle. Now, I've got a family and I've got work So I've got commitments from friends, family, and work, of course. So you have to be flexible. People ask me, when is my favorite time to run? Well, I don't really have an answer to that. It really depends on how much I've got on that day. If I've got a busy day and I can get out early in the morning, then that's when I'll run. If I've got to start early for work, and I mean early, sort of 5 or 6 a.m., then I'll finish the day at 4 or 5, and then I'll go for a jog or a run in the evening. Sometimes I can split the day in two and go for a run at lunchtime. But my point is with that, don't be rigid with your training. Don't think, oh, if I can't go at 5 p.m., then I'm not going to go. Be flexible, adapt to the situation, because not only will that help you with your training and to maintain that consistency with training, irrespective of what time of day it is, it will actually help you on the ultra marathon, because you've now trained at different parts of the day. So instead of consistently getting up at 5 a.m. to do your 1 hour, 10 kilometer, which is great, by the way, when it gets to 4, 5, 6 in the evening and you're still out on the ultra marathon, you just may not be used to that, to being out and training, as it were, running at that time of day. So for me, I honestly think there's a slight benefit there, training at different times of the day, morning, midday, afternoon, and even evening, late into the evening, maybe when it's dark. So that helps on the ultramarathon because you're out at all different times of the day. So be flexible and adapt to the situation. So the other one I'm talking about, tip number 9, is your recovery. So recovery is really important. For me, I tend to take 1, possibly 2 days off a week. And what I mean by a day off, I just mean sitting at my desk doing my normal day job. I don't mean traveling. I don't mean going off to do shopping. I'm literally either sitting or getting on with stuff for work, which is admin stuff and emails and so on. Possibly in the evening, just taking total relaxing time, watching a movie or watching, some kind of binge series on TV. Why? Because it switches off your brain and your muscles are literally doing nothing that day. And I think that's really important. I absolutely hear people when they talk about training 7 days a week, and that's absolutely fine for them. For me, that doesn't work. I think taking 1, possibly 2 days off per week really does help to regenerate your body, sort of reboot your brain, so you're not thinking running, jogging, exercising all the time. Do something different. Do something entirely different. Do a crossword, do a puzzle, play a game, whatever it is, but not involving physical activity. And I also things like mowing the lawn and gardening. I see people taking, that kind of activity as a day off. Well, for me, mowing the garden or the grass or trimming the hedge, this is all physical work. You need to give your body just a complete rest. So that's that tip number 9. So tip number 10, one of my favorite authors is Stephen Covey Sr. You may very well know the book. It's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of his first habits that highly effective people do is called start with the end in mind. And so in other words, what's your goal? What's your objective? So start with the end in mind. So have a think about your kit, your gear. What is it you're going to run in? So yes, you may have your normal shorts and t-shirt, as have I, but I'm also thinking about how am I going to feel having worn this gear for 10, 12, 14 hours? Are there any hot spots? For example, the hydration pack or the backpack. What are the straps like? What are the straps like that go around your chest and around your trunk? Are there any hot spots? Do they rub anywhere? Your socks, your trainers, all the gear. This is not a gear. This is not an equipment stroke gear YouTube video. This is essentially just about make sure you know what gear you're getting, read the reviews, see if you can buy something online and send it back if it's not suitable. Maybe you have to pay some postage, but try it out for sure. And then on that point, when you're leading up to an ultra marathon, not so much a road marathon, but certainly an ultra marathon, wear that stuff. Wear it for lots of training sessions. So you get used to a number of things. One, if there's any hot spots or tight spots, is there any chafing? Are you likely to blister? Not only with a hydration pack, but of course, with your shoes, your trainers, your socks. Wear all the gear that you're going to wear for the ultramarathon. Such an important point, because you will very, very quickly realize, hang on, I'm on a 10K, short 10K training run, and this is already starting to hurt. Or I can feel a hot spot on my right trainer, on my right shoe. Trust me, after 10, 12, 14 hours, that's going to get a lot worse. You're much better to find out earlier on in that whole journey than on the day of the race. So start with the end in mind. Start with the end in mind. So in other words, figure out how you're going to feel at the end of the ultramarathon, 14 hours into it, and buy the kit or the equipment or the gear according to that goal at the end. And the other thing about starting the end in mind is your mindset. So let's move on to tip number 10, I believe it was, your mindset. I don't know what to say about mindset. It's so desperately important. We touched on it earlier, but think about, visualize, picture, imagine yourself crossing the line at the end of the ultramarathon. Whether you're on a 50 or 100K or 25K, think about that. That keeps you positive. That keeps your dedication on the day on track, one step after the other. And when you think like that and you imagine yourself crossing the line, maybe feel how the medal's going to feel around your neck, maybe think about the pictures that the photographer takes at the end, whatever it takes for you, everyone's different, then picture it, imagine it, visualize it really, really well, and that will help you get towards the end. And of course, the next tip, tip number 12, I think it is, pace yourself. So pace yourself well from the start to the finish. As I mentioned earlier with the example, don't run off really fast. If you're going at 10-minute kilometer pace and you know you can maintain that throughout the ultramarathon, then start at 10-minute per kilometer pace. Don't start off at 5 or 6 kilometer pace, because by the end, once you've done 5 or 6 very high elevation peaks, you're going to be down to 15-20 minute per kilometer pace. So try and pace yourself so your average pace is plus or minus what you've been training at. So if you know, for me, I can't remember what it was on my pace, on my Coros watch, but I think my average pace was something like 14 minutes per kilometer. Now that takes into account the last runnable section that I was doing at 5:30 pace, and that, bear in mind, that was right at the end. So I knew I had the fuel and the capacity to run that pace, which is pretty quick after 55K. So I was running at 5.5 minutes per kilometer at the end of the race. But there were times during that whole race where I was at 30 minutes per kilometer, and that was on an incline at 30% incline. And it takes forever to get up these hills. So half an hour to do 1 kilometer, and at the end I was doing 5.5 minutes to do 1 kilometer. So the variation is significant. But in terms of the effort level, for me it was the same. So I was putting in as much effort into the 30-minute kilometer as I was in the 5.5-minute kilometer. So I wasn't expending too much energy or unexpected energy. So that's your pace. Now the next tip number 12 is know the course. If you go to any ultramarathon, of course, they will send you all the bits and pieces on email. You'll have a GPX file, you can download them, you can put them on your phone, you can put it on your watch. Have a close look at the route as well as the elevation. The route is one thing, fairly straightforward, but the elevation is something that I would pay particular attention to, and in relation to the checkpoints or aid stations. So how high is the elevation, and relatively how long is it to the next aid station or checkpoint? Have a look at that very carefully. Note it down. Put some, I printed mine out and I put some scribbles on there. So my anticipated time to get to the summit, anticipated time to come back down. There's the aid station. What are my needs? Am I going to be thirsty, hungry, or both? Typically, it was always both, but note down approximate times it's going to take you to get there. So for example, to reach 42 kilometers on the ultramarathon took me 10 hours. Now to reach 42 kilometers on one of my typical marathons takes me about 4 hours. So that's 2.5 times the time to cover the same distance. So if I'm typically taking one gel every half hour on a normal marathon, then you've got to think about, whoa, okay, so I have to have 2.5 times the amount of gels or whatever food you prefer to take compared to what I would consider for a normal marathon. So on a normal marathon, I might have 8 gels. On the ultra marathon, I had 10 and 4, so 14 gels plus an awful lot other food tucked into my pockets, because I knew that I would just be a lot more hungry. You're burning through an awful lot of calories. On the 50 kilometer, on the UTS 50, I burned through 5,500 calories. So you really have to consider that. On a normal marathon, I might blow through sort of 1,500, 2,000 calories. And that's not unusual. because you're working much harder on an ultra marathon because of the elevation. So that's about knowing the course, not only the distance, but the elevation and your nutrition and hydration needs for the whole length of the ultra marathon. So know the course. Listen to your body, it'd be my next tip. So tip number 12, listen to your body. If you are hungry or thirsty, and you should have been training this through the training block. If you are hungry or thirsty, you've already missed the opportunity to drink or eat. So get to the stage where you're just eating and drinking irrelevant of how you're feeling in terms of thirst or hunger. For me, I was eating and drinking every 10 or 12 minutes. Having a bite of this, having a drink of that, having some electrolytes and having a bar of chocolate, having some peanuts, whatever it might be, little pork pies or little baby bells to make it more savory instead of all the sweet sugary stuff. So eat and drink constantly. I would suggest personally, from my own experience, every 10 or 15 minutes. Don't wait until you're hungry or thirsty. So that would be, listen to your body. If you've got an ache or pain, or you can feel a hot spot in your trainer, this hasn't happened to me on the UTS, but it has happened to me on marathons where time is more critical. Not such a big issue on ultra trail marathons. If you have a hot spot, deal with it then and there. Don't wait until it gets worse, because get worse it will, and then you'll probably regret not addressing it earlier. So if you have a hot spot, for example, a blister forming in your trainer, I generally carry spare socks for the ultra. Change your socks, put a blister plaster over it as soon as you feel it, not an hour or 2 or 3 later, because by that time it will have got worse. So tip number 14, if you've got family or friends or support and they can be there for you, get them there. It's a really wonderful way to help lift your spirits and move you up in terms of your psyche, your spirit, your mindset. They're cheering you on. I've had them on the marathons where they're waving a flag, putting silly messages, smiley faces, whatever, and it really does help lift your spirits. So if you have friends or family who can come and support you, great, that really does help. So that would be my tip number 15. Last penultimate tip was tip number 16 is to basically just problem solve. What I mean by that is, as you're going through the ultramarathon, for me, the same as normal marathons, it's all about your ability to solve problems. You're constantly solving problems. When do I eat? What's the next checkpoint? How much do I need to drink? How much do I need to eat? Can I feel a hot spot? That's very closely allied to hydration, would you believe? So your brain is 75% water. So your ability to hydrate is not only hydrating your body, because you're using your muscles a lot, you're sweating, and all that fluid needs to be replaced with normal fluid and electrolytes. But your brain is what most people overlook sometimes. You need to hydrate to keep your brain functioning. If you are not able to process information quickly, if you can't think straight because you're just fatigued and tired, then you can't problem solve. And that's when issues and challenges start to rise. If you're not thinking straight, you may make a mistake in a particular direction. You may not eat or drink when you need to. You may make a poor decision in terms of not attending to a bad foot because you're not thinking clearly and you're not able to process information as well as you would do when you're fully hydrated. So your ability to problem solve on an ultramarathon does come back to hydration and nutrition. But remember that from the start right to the end, an ultramarathon is all about your ability to make decisions and problem solve all the way through. So that's my take on it, at least. And last but not least, the last tip number 16, is just to have fun. You know, you've been training for 3 or 4 months. There's a massive training block. The race itself is time for you to have fun. You've got all the pomp and ceremony, all the razzmatazz, all the photographers, all the music and so on and so forth at the start line and some of the aid stations. So make it your sort of lap of honor. This is the icing on the cake. You've trained hard for 4 or 5 months, 3 months, or whatever your training block was. Enjoy the day. Literally smile, have fun, connect with people. I met so many people on UTS 50. It's been absolutely fantastic. Still in touch with them right now, and enjoy it. Just have fun. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. Whether you finish or not, have fun and enjoy it. So that was my take, my hints and tips for my very first ultra marathon. If you've got any that you can think of, this, as I said on previous videos, this is a wonderful community where we can all learn from each other. I've learned from other YouTubers, and I've learned from other podcasts that I listen to, and articles and blogs. This is a compilation of my tips. Some of them you may well have heard before, but this is also my take on it, my interpretation, my perception of what I've just completed, the UTS 50. I really hope it's helped, and if you've got any questions or comments, please pop them down there, not just to help the channel, but also when I read comments and tips and hints from other YouTube channels, I think to myself, oh, that's a really good tip. Didn't think of that. And they don't come from the video, they come from the comments below. So if you've got any hints or tips or comments that you think might help other runners, ultramarathon or normal marathons, please jot them down there. It'll be fantastic to read them, and I always reply to them. So thanks very much for watching. Good luck on your next marathon or ultramarathon. I'm more than happy to answer any questions, and take care, good luck, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.